What critters?
Right behind me on the top is Timors, or a Timor rather.
Awesome.
And this one here is Argentine.
I love Argentines.
Yeah, Occidentalis or Occidentalis. How do you pronounce it?
I don't know either. In my head, I think I always read it as Occidentalis, but I'm not sure.
Ooh, that's the third way.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm definitely not to be trusted with Latin.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is to sound confident when you say it, right?
That's right, exactly. And then people from Europe will attack you, and you just have to be ready for it.
All right. Well, we're recording. This is episode 14 of The Expert and the Idiot. We're here with Lucas Lee, and I want to talk about Woma pythons today, and black-headed pythons, and Priceline jungle carpet pythons, which those are pretty incredible looking. And give us like a little rundown of your academic chops and what you do professionally and all that. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, happy to be here with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
It's going to be the idiot and the idiot, because I'm definitely not an expert, but
not likely.
But let's see. I like snakes and lizards. I work for a private sector environmental consulting company. I've kind of cut my teeth doing field biology work. These days it's a little more desktop based for me, but had a lot of good seasons in the field doing that. And in addition to that, before I started doing that, I worked at the East Bay Vivarium here in Berkeley, California. So animals and wildlife and herps in particular have always been something that I've been really into, both at home and professionally. And then academically, I went to UC Santa Cruz for environmental studies for undergrad. And then I went back to school in 2021 and completed my master's in biology zoo science under Dr. Loafman at West Liberty University. He runs the evidence-based herpetoculture lab there. So a lot of very fun, like-minded snake nerds getting degrees. And that's kind of the overview with that.
Cool. So with everything you learned from your master's degree, can you put that into can you summarize that into an hour speech and just pass that along to me?
I could probably do it in a sentence, is that nature and evolution is incredible and we don't know jack shit about anything.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by we don't know anything?
I mean, especially in the world of herps in particular, pretty much any question that you might choose to pursue, it tends to end with more research needed. And it seems like every discovery or revelation that's made just opens the door to a litany of new questions. And so, that's the allure of study. That's the draw of science, and makes it really easy to fall in love with the natural world, because it's a never ending puzzle. I think one of the things that became really clear during the master's coursework, because it is a broader biological degree, so we had to do coursework with all critters, not just the herps. And I think that as, you know, a social primate, as mammals, we definitely have a bias towards other mammals, and it shows in the research and in the frameworks that we try to apply to other animals. And
Can you give me an example?
Certainly. I mean, in the way that we measure intelligence, right? Like, if name 5 animals off the top of your head that you think most people would consider to be the most intelligent animals after people.
Yeah, elephants, dolphins, chimps. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's not the case, but we got a marine mammal, another social primate, and then a big old, megafaunal shit. I don't remember what they're called. Elephants. We'll just go with that. But so it's just interesting because we speak the language of those things, and it's interesting to explore the idea that perhaps they're not inherently more intelligent than something else. Maybe they're just the way that we have chosen to define that, and the way that we can interpret that is compatible with those critters and maybe not compatible with others. So I don't know. That's just off the top of my head example, okay. But there's definitely more research done. There's more credit and grace given to other taxa. So I guess all of that to say, I think there's a lot to discover about the things that are far more different from us that we don't tend to give a lot of credit to. And that was an interesting thing to notice during grad school.
What do you think of snakes and their intelligence? Do you think that we look at it from the wrong perspective? Do you think that they are intelligent? Like, what's your thoughts on that, and even your personal feelings too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, there's over 2,500 recognized species of snakes or something like that. Hopefully I'm not butchering the number, but I think there's a wide spectrum in that group. Just like with anything, I think some are incredibly intelligent and others perhaps less so. But I would say, again, that's just going off of my conventional human definition of intelligence. One thing that I do know is that snakes have been one of the most successful groups of organisms over, millennia. And perhaps it's better to consider intelligence as conditions leading to survival over millions and millions of years, which a lot of other species can't relate. So I don't know. It's interesting. Depends on the definition.
Yeah, that's true. Adaptation and how they deal with things. And it seems like snakes have really been able to adapt to humans kind of plowing through their environment and altering it.
Totally. Some more than others. Again, some snakes seem to flourish when humans come knocking and building houses and all that. It's like I just thought of that meme, like the barn owls. When people invented barns, they're like, yeah, like it's our time. There's some snakes that are happier, safer, and more successful in an attic than they would be in the tree that was there before. So, and it's another interesting one.
Yeah. I guess an attic would just be like an enclosed tree, right? An enclosed heated tree, or more temperature controlled than being up in a canopy.
It definitely helps keep a lot of the things that would eat you away. And where there's people, there's trash and there's food scraps, and therefore, good prey if you're a carpet python in an attic.
Yeah. So going through that, everything with your education, how how much have you been able to utilize all that you learned as a keeper and breeder?
I would like to think a good amount. I kind of only went to grad school because I was already enamored with keeping reptiles and breeding snakes in my apartment. I was never really planning on going back, but I heard Dr. Loafman talking about false water cobras on a podcast, and he pitched the grad program at the end. So it was really more a matter of like I was already doing this, and that just seemed like a great way to combine my passion with a very expensive piece of paper that might help me make a little bit more money professionally.
Yeah.
So I would say, there were definitely things in the herp classes that, just kind of get the gears turning when you have to look at, a 200-page AZA protocol for how zoos think you should keep an indigo snake or something, for example. There's a lot of ideas that you can take from that and apply to a lot of other species as well. But I would say I do think it's far more valuable to actually do keeping. The experience is always going to trump reading about something in a book. So I enjoyed it, but I would say in terms of my practices and things that I've learned over the years keeping and breeding animals at home and at work, I think that's probably more informative than school.
Nice. What does AZA stand for?
That's the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So here in the U.S., we have the AZA accredited institutions. So a lot of the major zoos and aquariums are going to fall into that category. And then there's different oversight bodies in different countries. So there's a European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and so on and so forth.
Nice. When did you start keeping?
So I had lots of different critters on and off my entire life. I used to joke with my friends, when I was a kid, that I had pretty much everything for a pet except a dog. They wouldn't let me get a dog, but I had the snakes and the lizards and the skinks and the newts and the salamanders. And so it really started just my dad and I would do a lot of hiking and fishing. And if we found something cool, we'd stick it in a jar and set it up in a 10-gallon and do our best, see how it went. So from an early age, stuff like that. But I really didn't get into keeping and breeding snakes at a obsessive level until the end of college. I got a corn snake just to kind of jump back into things my sophomore year of college, and it all ballooned from there into the madness that you see behind me today.
What all do you have behind you? I mean, like, what are, I mean, you don't have to go into their names and.
No, I got you. Yeah. Well, so I definitely, my bread and butter is the Australian stuff. Mostly blackheads, womas, carpet pythons. I've got water pythons at the moment, bunch of Antaresia, Stimsoni. I work with some Australian geckos as well. I've got Stropharis ciliaris, the spiny tail gecko, as well as Stropharis tenicata, golden tail gecko, Centralian knobtail gecko, Nephrurus amiae. We've got some Agurnia over here to my right, Agurnia stokesi. And then I also really love everything. So I can't really say that, but I also have Eastern indigos, Arizona mountain king snakes, Lake Chapala garter snakes.
Any boas?
Monitors. Yeah, well, Argentine boa.
Oh, cool.
And I also work with Odotria at the moment. I have a group of Pilberensis and a couple Varanus tristis.
Cool. How do you
Yeah.
keep your Argentine? I always want to pick people's brains on the Argentines because I love them, and I'm gonna have a trio here in a couple weeks.
Sweet. Yeah. I just recently picked up the Argentine. She is, I think, still less than a yearling. So at the moment, she's in a 3x2x2 because they're big babies and they grow fast.
Yeah.
But pretty typical husbandry so far. I do have some light UV on a couple hours a day, but nothing crazy. Typical hot spot, 88 to 92. I keep it pretty dry. I do have a humid hide in there, but I'm not trying to have constant moisture. How do you do it?
Yeah, 88 hotspot, and I think the cool side, it can vary between 76 and 78, but she's in a 6-foot enclosure.
Nice.
Because she's about 6 feet long, about 5.5, 6 feet long, somewhere in there.
Awesome.
And yeah, I absolutely fell in love with Argentines after I got her, and then that sickness kicked in, and I thought I need to get a male. And then I got a deal on a pair that I couldn't turn down. And so now I've got a pair that I've bought, and I'm waiting to have shipped once it cools down a little bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, they're fantastic. Just something about them for sure.
Yeah.
I would really like to pair her up. She's a mixed, like, high pink line and a max pink from Ancient Reproductions. So she's got a nice pink thing going on, but I'd love to pair her with like a super, super pink boy. Do you know of Bob
Geyer?
Yeah. The work that he's done maximizing that pink over so many generations is very impressive. I'd love to get a boy from him.
I know his animals are absolutely insane, and they keep that coloration, which is so cool.
Totally.
The one I have here is from Travis Johnson, Living Legless.
Great. Yeah.
And the pair I have coming is from the Fortune line, which was, I guess, smuggled into the country in the early 2000s and confiscated at the Los
like
Angeles.
All good things.
Yeah. Which was, and I guess those founding animals, that line, were confiscated at the Los Angeles Zoo, or at the Los Angeles airport, I'm sorry, and then given to the Seattle Zoo.
Okay.
And Edgar Fortune worked with them, and that's where that line came from.
Very cool. Do those have any sort of different look to them? Are they kind of on the darker end, or
they're pretty dark? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
pretty dark. And I'm just excited because they're pure Fortune. So it's
sweet.
So when I breed the male with this girl, it'll kind of be a cross of the two lines. I believe can't remember if Travis might not have had any lineage data on those ones, but yeah, I'm just
awesome. Cool either way.
Yeah, so cool. And I kind of dread their full grown size, but we'll figure it out.
Totally. That's one of the snakes that I'm trying to handle a lot because I don't want her to hate my guts when she's enormous.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's what was so cool about this girl is she's so chill and so curious. Always wants to come out. As soon as I'm in the room, she's usually at the door. And so I'll open it up and she'll poke her head out, and and that's where I do, I tend to maybe, I don't know, maybe I put more into the snakes than what they actually are intelligence wise, but she reminds me of my dog, where she wants to interact, whether or not she just wants food. I don't know, but
hey, I mean, who doesn't love that? Whatever the reason is, that definitely makes it easier to love your snake when they do stuff like that.
Exactly. So what is it that got you so turned onto the Womas and Blackheads?
Good question. Well, I do. So I do remember pretty early on, kind of when I caught the snake bug in college and I got that corn snake, I started, watching a bunch of YouTube videos, as one does, Brian Barczyk, et cetera, et cetera. I definitely was exposed to a Woma python on one of those videos, maybe like an old snake bites video or something like that. Previously had no idea what they were, and they just stuck out to me immediately as some, just beautiful. It's, when you see something and you're just like captured immediately by the look of it. So that was the Woma for me. And then after it was in my head from just doing some perusing on the internet that was an animal that I really wanted to see. They had a good group of them for sale at the East Bay Vivarium when I was like home for summer that year or something like that. And so I didn't buy one, but I asked if I could handle one and check it out. And the employee who was working there definitely was a little bit sadistic, and so she gladly agreed and unlocked the cage and handed over this, super overfed and rambunctious Woma, and it bit the crap out of me, right in the middle of the store on a weekend. All the kids were screaming and there's blood dripping all over the place. Much blood, as the president would say, but it's funny, right? Because you would think that would turn most people off to a species. It kind of branded me. I don't know. I couldn't get away from them after that. So I guess they kind of chose me a little bit in a way, with their painful kisses. So
yeah,
they always were on my mind. I didn't end up getting them until maybe 2020, I'd say. I actually got blackheads first, but once I did finally start letting Womas into my house, it ballooned pretty quick. In terms of the blackheads, though,
I'm sorry.
All
I
good.
was just going to say, it seems like the animals that you pick up have they're just the highest quality. Like like that. Just looking at your website and your Facebook and all that, it's like it looks like you put in a lot of time and thought into where you are going to get your animals from. I mean, the patterns that are on them are just like the best representation of those animals.
Well, yeah, thank you. I really I appreciate that. I would like to take credit, but I really can't. I've just been really lucky. And that's like, I'm not trying to be humble. That's just the truth. Like, in terms of the Woma project, after I got a couple animals, I saw Dan Vermelia posted up this beautiful baby for sale in the Woma Python USA group or whatever. And it was during COVID. So, a lot of time on my hands to make dumb decisions. I messaged him and asked if that animal was available, and he said no. So I almost, and this ended up being my male Woma that I call Bozo. So he's definitely my nicest animal. Whoever bought it from Dan ghosted him, and so I really literally did get lucky, because that snake was supposed to go to somebody else, and that person didn't end up footing the bill. So I got to swoop in and buy that snake. And then, in terms of a lot of the other stuff, it seems like a lot of really nice animals have kind of fallen from the sky, and I'm very lucky that has happened. But with the price jungles, with the Western Blackheads, that was kind of the case for all of that stuff.
How old are your price jungles?
They're 2019s. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was the last season that Doug bred his animals before he fell ill. Yeah.
So you're going to continue that line? And
yeah.
Oh,
yeah, definitely. I think that they look incredible. I really love that they're just messy and they look plucked straight out of out of the wild. They are not selectively bred for jet black and fluorescent yellow. They're tipped out like crazy, kind of greenish, golden, natural tones. So I would love to maintain that line and have something a little bit more reminiscent of, the jungle lines of the 90s before people really started honing in on that one very specific look that we all associate with jungles now.
Yeah, they're on my list of animals that I want to keep. I'm going to stay in contact with you.
Very good. Yeah, sounds good.
I'm working on getting. I want to keep a trio of jungles outside, and
awesome.
Here in Florida. So I'm working with a guy that's going to build a cage 8 foot long by 6 foot tall and 3.5 feet deep. So
that'll be sweet.
Yeah, I just want to nerd out and get cool plants in there, and give them all sorts of hides, down low and up high and everything. And yeah, I'm super excited, and they can kind of be my guinea pigs. And if it works well, then I'm going to keep, progressively more expensive animals outside. I think that would be pretty cool.
Oh, totally. And you're in the perfect place to do it. I feel like most, if not all, of that Australian stuff will thrive out there for you. So
yeah,
that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I was just talking to Brandon Wheeler about his diamonds that he kept outdoors or is keeping outdoors, and
absolutely the best. I would love to do that someday. I don't have a yard. I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd story in Oakland. So
oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh man, that gives me anxiety. All those cages in there on the 2nd story.
Yeah. It's a little crazy, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, man, I would get anxiety thinking about moving.
Oh, it's a big reason why I haven't. Like, I don't necessarily love where I'm at, but yeah, no, that's going to be a terrible week when I have to move.
Oh my God. Yeah. But you'll get past it, and then you'll be happy.
Yeah, probably a good opportunity to stop using these heavy melamine cages too, because
those are melamine.
Old timey and so heavy.
Yeah, I remember I built one of those for, I think it was my first pet reptile. It was a bearded dragon, and when the bearded dragon got rehomed and I was going to move out, it was this giant structure that I had to saw apart and leave at the side of the road.
Yeah, they're not great, but again, just whatever is available and cheap,
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah.
But
what do you have in the racks behind you?
Yeah, so I try to keep a balance of, mostly stuff in cages and then racks as well. The Stimson's pythons are in the racks. So are raise ups. Definitely some holdback womas. What else is in there? Some of the smaller males for breeding projects, but mostly the little guys and the raise ups.
Nice. I wish that racks didn't have such a bad rap. I wish that.
Yeah. Did you sense my political answer?
No. I mean, I'm getting racks now, and I'm so relieved that I'm going to have them. And I'm surprised I made it. I've been keeping, and I've been trying to avoid it because they are expensive.
I love these sea serpents ones. No affiliation, no sponsor or anything, but an affordable rack that has served me really, really well are those sea serpents.
Nice.
VVC.
I think I got the VE6s. I got 2 of those coming, and I'm
Nice.
probably going to be getting a third one. I wish that there was more. I think the problem is that they're so modular, so if somebody is new to the hobby, they look at it and they think,
what the hell?
what do I need to get? What does this come with? Does it come with the heat tape? How do I control the heat tape? Well,
there's that. And then there's definitely also just the optics of shoving a bunch of animals in drawers, which I get, but I also feel personally that a box is a box, and it matters more what you do with the box than whether the box slides in and out or has front opening doors.
Yeah. And from a quarantine standpoint, it simplifies everything. If because I'm going to have, I've got animals that are going to be coming in, and they're not ready to go into 4x2x2s, and they're not ready to be around the rest of my collection or the rest of my animals. So that isolation is so important. And,
No doubt.
It's something that I think new keepers should look at and understand that a lot of these do come with heat tape. It's almost a complete deal. You just have to get your thermostat, and, you're good to go. It's not that bad.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's an enormous amount of utility, and if people weren't utilizing them, breeders wouldn't be able to do what they do at the scale that they do, and your critters would be a lot more expensive in their 7-foot bioactive builds or whatever they end up in. They don't start that way. You're not going to find a breeder that is starting animals in exoterras when they're neonates.
Grass-fed and free-ranged ball pythons.
Right. Hey, I'm all for it. Once you have the animal and it's in your care, but it's just not feasible at scale for the breeder that is producing enough animals for your animal to be under $1,000.
Absolutely. And also, it's, what would you propose somebody would keep a neonate snake in?
Well, and that's the problem. A lot of them won't do well. I know that people that are welfare minded, which is great. I'm welfare minded as well. They like to think that you can put any baby reptile in something elaborate and big as long as there's enough hides, but that's just not the case. A lot of things are going to fail to thrive. You're not going to be able to monitor very well for how it's doing in a large, complex environment. And anybody that has done this at a larger scale and has tried to get some more difficult species feeding knows that there's really no successful alternative.
And just from a health perspective, and making sure that they're in a small enough area that they're easier to watch and keep an eye on, and it shouldn't even be an argument. And I think that maybe if there were more racks geared towards new keepers, as hey, this is your, Nick said it perfectly. When I talked to him on the podcast, if you had a newborn baby, you wouldn't just bring it home and put it in a bedroom. It would start out in a bassinet and then go to a crib, and then you have baby gates and playpens, and
right.
And they incrementally move up, and it makes sense to do the same thing with a baby snake.
Yeah, and I've just seen it enough times where something is not eating, not doing well, headed the wrong way, and then hey, throw that in something dark, compact, and small, and it saves that animal's life. So proof's in the pudding.
I tried it out, keeping animals in too big of tubs, just recently last year, and they stopped eating.
It's species specific too. Some things are a lot more sensitive, and other things are a lot more like womas. I think I could probably put a baby woma in a 10-foot cage and
Yeah.
it's stupid enough to live. But I love them for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Their feed response is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a Woma before. I can't remember where I got it from. This was back in the day, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And yeah, I remember every time I go in its tub, it would just latch onto my hand.
Yeah, I love it. There was an animal behavior course for the master's degree, and one of the assignments was to train an animal. And so I was going to do the target training deal. And at first I was thinking, oh, it'd be really fun to do that with the Woma, but it just kept trying to eat the target. So I ended up doing it with the indigo instead. It worked way better.
That's hilarious. How many indigos do you have?
I have 2 at my place and 2 at my neighbor, who's also kind of my animal partner's place. So he and I are 50-50 on the project, and we're working with 2.2 Easterns.
Nice. What size cage do they require as adults?
I think anything smaller than a 6x2 is less than sufficient. And they're definitely a species where more is always more. So, I really like what Dr. Loafman does with his false water cobras, because it's kind of the same deal. Just set up your room where you can open the door and let them roam a little bit, and they tend to put themselves away when they're done. I recommend doing the same with indigos, just so they can stretch out, move those muscles. They're so active.
That's so cool. So you just open them up and
yeah. When they're cruising, I'll just open the door and follow them around for a little bit and see what they do. The cage is only small if the door's closed.
Yeah.
But
what
obviously
kind of,
supervise.
what's their feeding schedule like for them? I don't keep any colubrids, so is it?
Yeah, they're high octane. I mean, their metabolism is nuts. I do try to feed them twice a week in most cases. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, if you don't, right, like if they go a couple weeks, they're not going to roll on you, but I do think it's good to feed them more often than not.
What about the Woma pythons? Are they is that just a adaptation to the environment that they're in, that they're just always looking for food, or is it that they have a fast metabolism? Do they need a lot of food?
That's a really good question. I have no idea, and it's interesting too, because obviously blackheads are the sister species, and they fill a similar niche, but blackheads, in my experience, are not nearly that psychotic and don't have that same bite first, ask questions later attitude in a lot of cases. Some do, don't get me wrong. Some of them are absolute psychopaths, but on the average, a blackhead is not that way. So I don't know what made Womas that way. I don't have an answer. I don't think that their metabolism is significantly different than your other more terrestrial Australian python. I don't know. I also don't know if that has been studied. Not a ton of work has been done with digestive efficiency or metabolic rates in these Australian pythons. So good question.
You were gonna start talking about your blackhead pythons before, and the quality of animals that you have, before I cut you off. Do you want to continue on that?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, it's just another example of things kind of falling from the sky in a great way. My first blackhead, like I said, I got blackheads before Womas. It was like the 3rd or 4th snake that I added when I was getting back into this. And it was just because there was a really beautiful male, Doug Price produced black-headed python that was for sale at the vivarium when I was working there in 2019. And it had been sitting there for 2 years. And, amazing animal, gorgeous snake. Nobody was buying. So I was able to lowball and employee discount my way to like a $500 blackhead. And
oh my God.
it was awesome. And I still have him. He's probably 13, 14 years old at this point, but that's one of my favorite snakes. He's great. He's sired a couple clutches, and from there, in terms of the Western stuff, that was, again, just I feel like I got really lucky. Dan Vermilia, the guy that I got my really nice Womas from, he's over in Connecticut. I think it's Connecticut, East Coast. He has been producing pure Western blackheads for a very, very long time. And then one day just decided that he was ready to be done with that. And I feel incredibly lucky and grateful. He reached out to me and offered me his animals. So that's how I got into that project, and was lucky enough to produce them the first season I had them here. And so I don't know. It's fun to reminisce on how the projects kind of picked themselves in a way. Like, I didn't set out to try to make the most orange Womas or maintain like relic lines of jungles or pure Western blackhead lines. They all kind of just came into place, and I'm really glad that it did, because I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
Oh yeah. When do you think you're going to be pairing up the Priceline jungles?
Definitely this upcoming season. Yeah, they were plenty old enough, but I needed to put some more weight on the girl to get them there. But they're there. It'll be good.
Are you at all apprehensive
to pair them?
Yeah.
Nah.
No, that's good. Cool.
Nah. Yeah, jungles. I don't want to jinx anything. I'll knock on melamine. But
particle wood.
Yeah, I'll knock on particle wood. The jungles have not given me much trouble thus far, and so hopefully that continues to be the case.
That's awesome. How long do snakes maintain their fertility, and does it degrade based on age, or does it degrade based on the amount of times that they've bred? Like, can they be like bred a ton when they're younger, and then do they sort of burn out? Because talking to Brandon last weekend, it blew my mind that his diamond females are 20.
Yeah.
And he got 16 eggs.
For sure. Yeah. And that's another great question, and kind of call back to the very beginning of our conversation. It's another more research needed question. But on the aggregate, I think people that have been doing this much longer than me and have a lot more experience than me would say that you can burn a young animal out and hamper their reproductive longevity by breeding them, over and over and over and over again when they're young. So it's almost as if there's a number of eggs. Maybe there's not, right? It's not like humans where there's a set number. I'm just saying, like, if a snake could lay 100 eggs in its lifetime or something, maybe you breed that snake 4 years in a row when it's young, and then you finally give it a year off and it never does it again. You hear stories like that. Or maybe you have a snake and you breed it 1 year, give it 2 years off, breed it 1 year, give it 2 years off. I feel like people that do that, that's when you hear that they have snakes in their late teens, early 20s still reproducing. So I think that it's fair to say that fecundity and overall, reproductive productivity.
Can you define that word?
Oh yeah, sorry. Fecundity is like fertility.
Okay.
It will drop as they get older, just like with any living thing. But I think it's more an exercise in like, what's it like, pacing the animal, not like the tortoise and the hare kind of thing, right? Like if you're kind to that animal in terms of letting it bounce back, not burning it out, breeding it over and over and over and over again when it's young, I think that you'll have better luck trying to breed it when it's older. But all of this again is not supported by any science, and it's probably very species dependent. It's probably individual dependent as well. I have a 22-year-old pair of Western black-headed pythons. The male sired my clutch a couple of years ago, and he did just fine. So it's interesting. I got a clutch this year from a Brussels python that Nick sent over that was born in 2009. And she had mixed fertility. She had 8 good eggs and 6 slugs. So there's the problem. We're never going to know if that's because she's 15 years old or if it's something else, right? So it's really hard to prove whether her age was the cause there. Maybe she didn't get cold enough. Maybe it was the male. How do you prove these things? It's kind of tough, but
yeah,
I don't know. That was a long-winded way to say we don't know, but I think just you increase your chances of being successful with an older animal by being responsible when that animal is younger.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm just thinking of my own projects and how my animal's health and well-being is number one priority to me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm not trying to make a living doing this.
Right.
It's going to be a hobby. So I don't want to cause undue stress to my animals, systems or their longevity. I don't want to, cut it way back. So you think that just anecdotally, it would be better to do 2 years off and 1 year on, or, what's your personal thoughts on that with your experience?
I like okay. It's a good question again. I think that for some species, I'm comfortable doing 2 years on, 1 year off. And then for other species, it seems like it probably is more responsible to do 1 year on, 2 years off. Does that make sense?
So specifically talking about like boas and pythons.
Okay. So I feel like with Brettles, for example, I'm not afraid to breed them 2 years in a row as long as I give them that year off after that. And I guess the reason for that is mostly just because I talk to Nick so much and I know that that's what he does, and he's been very successful, and I guess I just trust his experience. With something, let's see, I'm trying to think of something that is a little different. I know you said boas and pythons, but I'm thinking geckos. So something that's like more prone to getting egg bound, for example. Maybe that's something that you give more time for them to bounce back. I'm thinking of Stropharis because they do get egg bound a bunch. But then again, they probably will just lay eggs anyway, no matter what you do. So I take it back. Sorry, I led myself down a tunnel of lies. No, I guess. Can I just completely change my entire statement and say
Sure.
that what matters more than any set schedule, in my opinion, is just watching the animal's body condition and making that decision based on what you're actually seeing.
Okay.
In terms of how fast they rebound, whether they put that weight back. I've had animals that lay their clutch and then are just back to looking the way they looked in terms of body weight, like within a couple meals. And I've had other animals where it takes like a year and a half, and maybe they were so depleted from their clutch that they got a respiratory infection, and then you gotta deal with that first. And then you know, it's all just case by case basis. So I don't know.
Now, even if they do bounce right back, does that still mean that internally they're fully recovered? You know, or does the outside and what's being presented to you always match what's going on internally? Probably not.
Okay. No. Yeah, I feel like I boofed this one. That did a bad answer. But
I'm asking because I think about this stuff all the time. You know, I've
again, the idiot and the idiot. I'm doing my best.
I am trying to figure out the best way to, do good by the animals and keep keep feeding, pure animals into the hobby and things like that, with lineage and things, which I think is important too. And also just that I never wanted to breed snakes before until I recently got back into it. And then all of a sudden I was like, now I want to breed, now it's something I want to try doing.
Yeah, I guess, thinking as we speak and kind of developing thoughts as we go, I think the best answer is that I don't know. And I am going mostly based off of the 2 years on, 1 year off kind of thing.
And you said that's what Nick does?
Yep.
Okay.
At least with carpet pythons. But yeah, I guess the best answer is that we don't really know scientifically, physiologically. I think that everybody has a pretty good idea that these animals probably don't breed every year in the wild because life just isn't that easy in the wild. And they're not necessarily going to be eating, a nice fat, juicy lab rat and getting their weight back after laying. But it's all just guesswork because we can't track really an individual animal over 2 decades to see when it laid. That kind of work just isn't being done. So yeah, I guess it really is just kind of all best guess. And that's why I would say if your priority is to produce babies, try to do it responsibly with like the 2 on 1 off. If your priority is the animal, I do agree with kind of the platitude that breeding your animal is the most dangerous thing you can do as a keeper. So then maybe you'd be even more sparing than that. It just depends on the goal, I suppose.
So if I'm doing my jungle carpet project, I had planned on having either 2.2 indoors or 1.3 indoors and then 1.2 outdoors. And if I did 1.3 indoors, then I could have it set up where they could take more time off, recover more. But I think maybe that's the good out of everything that you said is maybe the well, just kind of, combining all the thoughts together is
Mm-hmm.
2 years off, 1 year on, and then body condition on top of that, and
Yeah, for sure. I guess I do think the less you reproduce an animal, you're probably increasing the odds of longevity. But that's just intuition. Obviously, I don't have any scientific backing for that. So I don't know.
Damn it, you went to school for this.
Yeah, I know. But that's the problem, is that the people teaching school don't know either.
Yeah, there needs to be more studies done on snakes and their reproduction and everything.
Right. Yeah. And so Dr. Dale DiNardo, PhD, head vet and herpetology professor at Arizona State, he's done a ton of work with Antaresia because they're a smaller snake. You can keep a lot of them in racks on campus and they breed readily. So he kind of has used that species to do a lot of reproductive studies with water balance and more egg focused work. But I don't think that any focused work has gone into how a reproductive event might impact, like a lifespan of an animal. And I don't know how you would do that at scale. You can do that with a couple animals over, the course of their lifetimes, but I don't know if it would be feasible to track that at a sample size that's large enough to make, significant conclusions. I don't know. I think what would be really good is if we could figure out a way to track wild specimens long term. I mean, we can do radio tracking, but those studies are usually over the course of like a year or two. I don't think they tend to leave those in for very long.
Yeah, it would need to be like a 5 or 10 year study to really see what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, shoot, they're doing it with lions and everything, so.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good point, but yeah, you'd need to look at a lot of animals.
Yeah. So
I'm just rambling. I don't know.
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate, just everything that you're putting out there. Because it is stuff that I think about all the time, where you hear horror stories about a snake that gets egg bound or whatever, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know, maybe I don't want to breed my snakes, because you spend 4 or 5 years growing them up and getting attached to them too as part of the family or as a pet or whatever, and then you put their life in jeopardy doing that.
Yeah, there's no question. I had a really shit year for that last year. After my first couple of years of breeding, everything went fairly flawlessly, and so that was a really good well, not good, terrible in every way, but a good wake-up call that it's not without risk. And you do need to weigh that with.
Can you elaborate on that? Just
sure. I've talked about all of it publicly, so no problem. I had Western Blackhead from Derek Roddy get egg bound, prolapse, and die. I had, maybe that was last year, but I can't remember if this was last year or 2 years ago, but I had a Brettles get egg bound, took her to the vet, spent lots of money with the vet, and it ended up still just not being enough. She hemorrhaged after the eggs were palpated out and died. So, and then I had a Woma that laid her clutch, got that respiratory infection like I alluded to earlier, it wouldn't be tickled by multiple different injectable and oral antibiotics, a lot more vet visits, died. So it happens.
And that was all in one season?
So definitely the Woma and the Blackhead were last year. I can't recall if the Brettles was last year or 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was all in one season.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Yeah, not great, but it's the risk of breeding.
Yeah. Now, when they become egg bound, do the eggs ever make it? Are you able to still incubate them, or is
did lay on her own were good and hatched. You kind of get that silver lining. You get to keep her kids and, kind of still have a piece of her in a way. But the eggs that were inside, no, they did not make it. And I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure somebody has gotten eggs out and incubated them and had success. I've never heard of it personally, but I don't think it's common. I think that would be the exception. They're usually toasted at that point.
Can you talk about the cost that incurs, like the vet cost?
Yeah. I mean, it's still on my Capital One card. It's like $2,000 for the Brettles, and
wow.
It's expensive.
Wow. And then to have it just still
not work out. Yeah. And I have a great vet, like he knows what he's doing. There's what you can do, and then it's not always successful, but you got to be prepared for things to go wrong. And I personally think if you are putting the animal through the breeding project for your personal gain, you should be prepared to try and give them the best chance to live. So, be prepared for the vet bills too. Otherwise, can definitely get into a slippery moral conversation really fast about,
you're an asshole.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So how do you determine if an animal is egg bound? Do you, after they lay and then they stop laying, do you palpate, which means, can you describe what it means to palpate an animal?
Sure. Yeah. In the case of the Brettles that unfortunately this happened to, it was very clear, because she did lay half that clutch, and then you could see that she was still pretty gravid. That they get a nice amount of abdominal swelling that once they lay their clutch goes away. I had seen that enough before to realize that it had not gone all the way away. But in terms of palpating, the way that I like to do it is I kind of put my pointer finger on the dorsal on top of the snake and the meat of my thumb on the belly. And then I let the snake travel, slither on its own. I'll like put its head into the cage and let it go. Because when they're on the move, the muscles that would inhibit you from feeling what's going on in there are a little bit more relaxed. If you are just holding the snake and you try to palpate, sometimes that can be a little bit tougher. But if you let them basically slither through your fingers, you can kind of feel like the eggs. When you get to that part of the body, it kind of feels like there's ping pong balls in there or something like that, depending on the species. So that's how I do it.
And is there any hope that she'll be able to lay those eggs, or like how much time elapses before you throw in the towel and say, okay, it's time to go to the vet?
Yeah. Well, so with the Brettles, because she laid half and I know that she was trying, it was pretty clear that there was a problem. So I didn't wait very long at all in that case. I don't think a snake is going to purposefully lay half and then call it a day and then go back and try again a few days later. That doesn't tend to happen. And then with the blackhead, you see your ovulation and you start your countdown. I'd say if the snake doesn't lay within 35, maybe 40, pushing it days of the post-ovulatory shed, it's time to start getting a little concerned. But it's tough because there are the outlier instances where maybe a snake does lay successfully 40 or 50 days after the shed, but in most cases you're going to get it 15 to 30 days after. But you just kind of have to make that judgment call.
And what is it that actually kills the snake? Is it prolapsing? Is it sepsis? Is it like what is actually occurring inside the body that's causing that death?
Yeah, in the case of the Brettles, the vet put her under and lubed up the oviduct and tried to palpate out the eggs, but in doing so caused enough internal bleeding for the snake to pass, like within the week. So that is how that happened for the Brettles. So it wasn't the egg binding itself that killed her. It was the intervention. Not to say that if you did nothing, she'd have been fine. If you leave it, I think, like you said, yeah, the sepsis, right? The eggs rotting inside, essentially. I think that can happen. I think it can also inhibit the snake from passing waste properly, depending on if those eggs are low enough and obstructing like the intestines. Excuse me. And then in the case of the blackhead, she strained enough trying to get those out that insides became outsides, and that's just not survivable. So yeah.
Oh, this is so depressing.
Yeah, let's talk about something more fun. No.
This is the expert in the depressing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's definitely something that is on my mind. And it should be on anybody's mind that wants to breed snakes.
That's right. Yeah, you just have to know what's possible, and it's not always going to go well.
Yeah.
A good season is when there's more good things than bad things, because there are going to be both if you're doing it at scale.
Okay. How about field herping? How much death do you encounter out in the wild? No, field herping. Do you do any of it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a big field herper. Definitely when I was working as a field biologist too, I was kind of half doing my job, half just looking for snakes the whole time. So yeah, it's great. It's a passion for sure.
Are you doing it all here in the US, or have you left the country and done any?
So far, all in the US. I would love to do it elsewhere. I'm planning to go to Australia next year.
Nice.
So really excited about that, obviously. But yeah, mostly in and around the Bay Area. Here in California, I've done a good bit in Southern California, and then I occasionally travel around for music, and whenever we have time, I'm looking for stuff wherever we are around the country. So yeah.
Nice. You'll have to come out here to Florida one day, and we'll
definitely
go look at the Burmese pythons.
Sounds like a great time. My Florida travels have only gone as far as Jacksonville, so I've barely,
that's
barely got in Florida. There. Yeah, there's a quick in and out.
Yeah, yeah. It's Australia is something that's on my bucket list. I want to do that really bad.
Totally, yeah, and it's big place. There's a lot of trips in there. It's not just a one and done.
For sure. Yeah. What have you done anything around like where are all the redwoods there in California?
Yeah, they're kind of throughout on the Coast Range
Yeah.
from about where I'm at, up through the Pacific Northwest into Canada. So
Nice.
yeah, I am frequently in the redwoods, but
Nice.
it's not the best for herping.
Oh, really? There's not a lot out there?
Not in the way of snakes. In a lot of cases, what I find in the redwoods are more like salamanders and stuff like that. California giant salamander. That's a fun one. That
How giant are we talking?
They get pretty big. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're large. It's Dicamptodon. So it's cool when its name sounds like a dinosaur.
I was just gonna say that.
yeah. They live in the streams in old growth redwoods, excuse me. And so I've gone out and found those. That's a really good time. But
So
the
cool.
snakes tend to be, at least the snakes that I enjoy finding, tend to be more in kind of the scrubby chaparral grassland type areas outside of the redwoods.
Cool. If I ever come out to California, you'll have to show me around. That's
Absolutely.
on my bucket list too. Is
Yeah.
to see the redwoods. That's something I really want to see.
Yeah, it's incredible. I am lucky to be used to it growing up here, but and when I see people that haven't seen them before, like just marveling at the scale of it, it clicks in my head that it's special and different.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that would be me for sure. I would not. I'd be annoying. I wouldn't be able to stop talking about it.
Yeah, there's some really amazing spots. Muir Woods is a really nice protected old growth area where some of the trees are just enormous, but a lot of the redwood forest is kind of secondary growth after the timber industry got the big ones, but you can still find some big ones if you go to the right places.
Nice. How do you like living in California?
Overall, I love California for the nature. I don't love the cost of living.
Yeah.
It's pretty bullshit, but what are you going to do? Yeah. Born and raised here in the Bay Area. So
it seems like a lot of the people that I talk to that are in California or from California really enjoy it there.
mm-hmm. It's beautiful. I mean, you can't beat the diversity of habitats. You can be at a beautiful Pacific Ocean beach and then drive 10 minutes and be in your old growth redwoods, drive another 15 minutes and you're at the Sacramento River Delta, and it's just a little bit of everything. Keep driving, you're in the Sierra Nevadas, Yosemite. There's a lot of incredible sights and places to enjoy nature for sure.
It's such a huge place. We're going to be doing a family vacation out to Washington, and I thought, oh, maybe we could drive out and see the redwoods. And then I looked, and it would be like a 12-hour drive, and I'm like, no, I made a mistake.
Yeah, it's still beautiful up there, though. What part are you going to?
We're going to be in Kettle Falls. Yeah, flying into Spokane, and then I think it's like a 2-hour drive to Kettle Falls. So pretty
sweet,
pretty close up there. I've been talking to I talked to Ryan Young about what should I be herping for, because I'm gonna have my kids with me. So they're
awesome.
Hopefully we'll find a rubber boa. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm trying to find too. That's my white whale.
Oh, well, that's not good. Now I'm thinking the likelihood of me finding one in a couple days is.
Oh man, nah. Up there, you'll have no problem. I should have no problem too. I'm just cursed. Like everyone around me finds them. When I'm there, they're not.
He said it's a numbers game. You just have to. It's a matter of how many rocks you can flip.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm hoping that we'll be able to flip enough rocks, because it's funny. My son has a snake book, as all kids should, and he brought over a picture of a rubber boa, and he's like, I want to get a rubber boa as a pet, and I'm like,
Me
well,
too. He has good
yeah,
taste.
they're pretty interesting little animals, but
Totally.
yeah, hopefully we'll see some cool salamanders and some different things out there. I'm hoping.
Awesome.
What
Yeah.
what kind of lizards do you keep? I know you gave the list, but I want to kind of put more thought into it now and
Sure.
go through those.
Yeah. At the moment, I have the Agurnia stokesi, the Gidgee skinks. I have the Stropharis and Nephrurus geckos. And then for dwarf monitors at the moment, I'm keeping the Pilbara rock monitors, and I have a few black-headed monitors as well. In the past, I've kept a bunch of Ackies and Kimberly rock monitors. I had a black throat for like 2 months when I was working at the vivarium, which was so stupid, but I had a blast. It was a baby. So yeah, that's what I've kept here.
Nice. Do you plan on getting anything else, or are you pretty happy with that?
I love lizards. I would have more. It's just more of a space thing.
Yeah.
But in the future, if I'm not in a 2-bedroom apartment, I would love to have more lizards.
Oh yeah. What
Yeah.
about blue tongue skinks?
I really would love some blue tongues. Yeah, they're fantastic. I've never kept them at home. I've only worked with them at jobs.
Yeah.
But those blotchies are pretty epic.
Yeah, for sure. I just had Ron St. Pierre on, and so yeah, he got me thinking that I need blue tongue skinks.
Yeah.
They're just so cool.
So the blue tongues would be great. Obviously, a shingleback or two would be pretty fun, but I'm
Heck
gonna
yeah.
need to lottery and figure that one out. But I would love to get more Agurnia as well. They've really, I've really become pretty enamored with them. They're a fun group.
Nice. Do you are you down to do a Woma Python care guide?
Sure. Well, so Womas are pretty hardy. I think that's one of the best things about them. They come from some of the most insane arid landscapes in Australia, but that doesn't mean necessarily that we should keep them that way. In the wild, they spend some radio tracking data suggests more than 80% of the time in burrows underground, which is the number one best thermal, stable thermal environment for them to be in. When it's 114 degrees above ground, that burrow is still staying in the high 80s. When it's below freezing, the burrow is staying, maybe in the high 60s, low 70s. So they seek out kind of your typical Python temperatures, which is really great for us in captivity. I like to keep my Woma Pythons pretty close to ambient, with a supplementary hotspot in the high 80s. So pretty typical again. But because they do have such a fossorial life history, they are underground so often. What I like to do is drill with a circular saw, or that's what it's called, right?
Hole saw.
Circular hole saw. Thank you. I'm sorry, it's early. I drill a hole on top of the PVC hide boxes that you can get at, just Reptile Basics or something like that, and partially bury it in the substrate. So they enter from the top. They take to it just instinctively. Even if it does have a front door, they always go in from the top.
Really?
And it's great. The indigos, I do the same thing. Blackheads, I do the same thing. It just seems more intuitive for them to go down into something.
Mm.
But I like to encourage them to practice their natural behaviors that way. I like to give them a substrate that they can kind of dig around in, because they are one of, I think, the only species of Australian python that's known to dig. They use the base of their head and kind of arch their neck in a J shape and scoop the substrates towards their body. So that's really fun to watch. So I use like a finer shaving in most cases, kind of like the Sandy chip kind of thing, so they can dig around in that. Fresh water at all times, the usual.
Do you think that they're more of a display animal, or do they make like a good, pet snake?
100%. Yeah. So they are diurnal. They're very active at all times of the day. They're very confident out and about frequently. If you want a snake that you're going to see a lot, cruising around and checking things out, they're a great option. The only thing that keeps them from being like a perfect pet snake is the propensity for them to test if things are edible. They're not mean, they're not aggressive, they like to eat. So it's like a 5-foot king snake.
Can that be curbed with like tap training?
In my experience,
or do they try to eat the hook?
They try to eat the hook. But it's funny. In my experience, it seems like they exist on either side of the extreme. Either they're super, super placid and trustworthy and never bite, or they bite everything. I don't really have any that are in the middle. So it's kind of luck of the draw there. You're either going to get a Woma that you can hand to a child and feel comfortable about it, or you're going to get a Woma that bites anything next to its face. At least in my experience.
Now, you wouldn't recommend keeping on a like a paper. You'd recommend the substrate so they can.
Oh, I mean, you definitely can. I just, I kind of prefer the spot cleaning ability and the ability for them to dig in like a loose substrate. But if paper's your thing, that's no problem.
Okay. And you said ambient like an ambient. What's that range for temps with the ambient?
So my apartment in the Bay Area here, I don't have heat or AC or anything like that. So my ambient just kind of is Oakland. And so it ranges, like the hotter days in the summer, it gets up to like 88 degrees, 90 degrees in here, down to, the low 60s, high 50s during the nights in the colder times of the year. But I never really get like frosty here. So yeah, my ambients are kind of just outside.
Okay.
I'd say average like 70 to 80. Yeah.
Okay. And for their hotspot, you're doing 88 to 90 in there. Okay. And how often are they utilizing that basking spot? Do they use it a lot, or is it, do you see them use it more after they eat?
Yeah, more after they eat. I'd say blackheads are more of an active basker in my experience than Womas. The Womas they're pretty aloof. They're pretty, they just kind of are. They just kind of exist. They do very random things. Yeah.
What about if you're in a very if somebody was in a very stable temperature environment, like you have the big swings, so you're kind of always cycling your animals from a temperature standpoint, right? Now, would you recommend that somebody does that if they're even in a more stable environment, that they offer that temperature cycle?
I like a night drop for any species that experiences it in the wild. I definitely try to have like a 5 to 10 degree night drop. And what that means for my stuff in most cases is just turning off the heat at night.
Okay.
But if you're not like trying to start a reproductive cycle, if you're not trying to breed, then it's not necessary. I think that in general, people keep snakes too hot too often. And it's probably helpful for them to kind of slow or shut down their systems a little bit every now and then. I don't know why, but I keep thinking of snakes like in a lot of ways, pythons are kind of like a candle. And I feel like literally with heat, we can kind of light that candle with feeding, with reproductive events. And it just seems like it's probably good for their anatomy to shut that down every now and again and just let them exist.
Yeah. What about humidity? Do you humidify your room? Do you mist your animals? Do they need that, or do they benefit from that?
I don't humidify my room. The humidity in the Bay Area tends to live around 50 or 60%, I'd say.
Oh wow, perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I don't tend to have issues with that. Some species I provide humid hides to in the form of, a box with damp sphagnum. I prefer to do that with snakes rather than a moist overall environment. I like to kind of encapsulate a moist environment within a dry environment, because I think that constantly wet is always going to be worse than being able to get wet and then get dry. But I do spray geckos, lizards. Yeah, just the geckos and lizards. I don't really spray snakes.
Okay.
No.
I usually let mine dry out, and then I'll mist them like once a week, and then kind of by the next day it's like a little damp, and then it gets drier and drier. And I mean, with being in Florida, with the heat outside, the AC is always running, which it dehumidifies the house.
Right.
So it brings it down to the 40s sometimes. So
yeah. And when I used to work with some of the more moisture sensitive species, I've had GTPs, I've had rainbow boas. I would spray those occasionally.
Sure.
It's just, I feel like my collection is geared towards things that shed and exist just fine without any external moisture at this point. I've got a lot of the desert pythons and things like that.
What about when they're shedding? Is that when you offer like a more damp hide, or do they shed no problem regardless?
I don't tend to have problems with shedding. The animals that I offer humid hides to, I kind of just leave them in at all times. I don't really worry too much about sheds. I haven't had issues.
Okay. Yeah. How often do you change waters?
I try to do waters at least once a week. I try to do it twice a week. I think that's another case where it's as much as you can do it, the better. I don't like drinking a glass of water after it sat on the nightstand all night. It starts to taste a little funky. And I notice that when I do change waters, especially the Aspidaites and the indigos, they're over, like they can tell that it's fresh and they're drinking as soon as I put the new water in the cage. So promoting hydration, I think, is always a good thing. So I try to do it pretty often.
Okay, cool. And how are you sanitizing your bowls? Are you doing that once a week, or are you trying to do that twice a week as well? Or is it like a supplemental add water? Or
with most of my setups, I'm using the 16-ounce deli cups as disposable water bowls, and dump them and recycle the cups afterwards. So I don't do a ton of scrubbing. I just start with a fresh cup to try and keep that microbial risk down. The cages that I do have, like a ceramic bowl, I tend to do like a bleach soak and then just wash it with Dawn dish soap. I used to be a lot more lax with disinfecting until I had that Woma python get that respiratory infection that antibiotics wouldn't fix. That scared me. So, I mean, I tested it, you know, it was not viral. I did all the testing to know that it was bacterial, but when you have something like that happen, you know, bleach starts looking a lot better.
Yeah. I try to do the same thing once a week. I soak in hot bleach water and then give it like 15, 20 minutes. And then same thing you do, scrub it down with Dawn and get on with it.
Yeah.
What about giving bowls large enough to soak in? Do they soak? Do Womas or Blackheads soak or?
Not in my experience. No.
Okay.
I've definitely had animals in setups with bowls large enough for them to do that, and they have not.
Okay.
But that's not to say that they won't, or you know, maybe an individual might be more into it than another, but it hasn't really been a big part of their behavior for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on UVB? I know you mentioned it for your Argentine. Do most of your snakes that are in display cages get UVB?
Yeah, I do. I have it in all of the lit cages. I think that excuse me. Sorry, I got a tickle. I think that it is another example of more research needed. But I think that as long as you're providing it in a gradient that can be escaped from and kind of dosed as desired, then it can't really hurt, in my opinion. I think some evidence might point to it leading to some health benefits in terms of vitamin D synthesis and stuff like that. But I definitely am not in the camp that you need to have it. But I think if you can, odds are it's probably doing more good than harm as long as they can get away from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how much, like my cages, I have the UV take up about 50% of the cage. Do you think that's a good ratio to have it where they can go to one side and totally get out of it?
Yeah, totally. I'd say so. I don't know, maybe you've observed this too, but I've definitely noticed some species, some individuals that choose to spend time under a UVB rather than under the heat. You know, it seems deliberate sometimes. And you know, I've heard others say the same. So it's interesting. I think that we definitely need to learn more about what that does physiologically. There's only a small handful of papers that look into that for snakes specifically. I think a lot of the discourse around UVB is extrapolating from studies with other species or, you know, lizards and stuff like that. But again, I feel like it's kind of, why not?
Yeah. So again, we need more research.
Yeah, and again, it's another one where I'd point out that it's probably also very species dependent. You know, you definitely have species that are more that have a stronger association with like basking in direct sunlight in the wild than others. So
I've noticed that with my Argentine for sure. She seems to really like getting under the UV and basking.
Yeah, definitely. When I kept false water cobras, they were one that really seemed to seek it out. Indigos haven't seemed to care much, which I guess kind of makes sense because they're underground in the gopher tortoise burrows majority of the time. Yeah.
Okay. What is the ideal enclosure size for an adult Woma?
I think that I like more is better again. I mean, it just with any of these mid-size to large size pythons that are are pretty active. I don't think you can really offer too much space. I try to offer at least like a 3x2 for an adult. But even then, that it's not necessarily best practice in my opinion. It's just what I'm capable of at the moment. So yeah, more's better. They move around. They'll use every inch.
Okay. And what are you feeding primarily? Are you doing just rodents, or do you ever mix it up and give them any bird prey?
I do. So mostly rodents for the womas for sure, and then for the blackheads and indigos and other stuff like that, I try to mix in a heavier ratio of chicks and quail. The snake eaters, the reptile feeders, I do think it's better for their systems to try to stick to mostly bird, or at least, more mice, less like big fat rats. Try to keep it a little more lean. Yeah. Do
you have any Morelia that it won't take rodents that are strictly on birds?
No. I had one jungle from Doug, one of the striped jungles that was a quail guy, but
I've got one of those.
Yeah, I got him out of here.
It's annoying. And every time I think like, boy, he's really looking for food. He's hanging out of his sky hide, and I'll put a rodent in there, and it's like it doesn't exist. It's like it's
totally.
It's like it's a decoration in his cage, and then I'll put a quail in and he's on top of it.
I had a baby Woma this year that was a quail dude out of the egg, which is pretty weird because usually they are the easiest snake I've ever got started. They just take frozen out of the egg like the day after they shed. It's great.
Wow.
But yeah, so that particular one, just like what you're saying, rodents weren't real. They didn't exist. And for a Woma, that is really weird. But I like snipped off the wing of a day old quail and like pinched it together with a fuzzy and put that in front of his face, and it wrapped and ate the whole thing because they're also pretty dumb. So he's good now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I might have to give that a try.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll work for smarter snakes, but for my beloved Womas, it was a bird.
Wow. How often are you feeding Womas? Like first year of life? Is it once a week or?
Yeah, I'm definitely not very scheduled, not very regimented with feeding with anything except for the indigos. Everything else is kind of random. I do. Well, random is disingenuous. It's more of like an animal specific thing. Like I feel like my collection is small enough where I can keep track of everybody still, and my schedule is kind of just more dependent on what the animal is and what my plans for them are. For babies, sometimes it'll be weekly, maybe sometimes I'll feed them twice in a week, and sometimes I won't feed them for a few weeks. I don't think that schedules are beneficial for pythons, at least. I think a little bit of induced chaos is good. And then I'm definitely, I'm an apprentice of Nick in terms of how I feed adults. And I think it's healthier and more helpful for their longevity to feed more sparingly and give them, a seasonal feeding cycle that includes a pretty extensive break from food to let their systems rest.
How long is that duration of time, the fast?
It depends again on the species, but for some of like my male Brettles, for example, they might not eat from August to May. That it can be months
That's so long.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, I have male Brettles, and I guess Brettles are the one that's come to mind because they are that spring breeder that I'd get deeply cold and I don't
Mhm.
feed during that cool down period. It's almost like an induced brumation with supplemental heat during the day.
What's that heat like during the day?
Because of my situation being in an apartment, I move the snakes into cooling bins at night. So it's a lot of work. I do it every day. Haul them out to my balcony and
Wow.
let them ride through the night in the cold. And then I just put them back in their cage and give them like mid 80s for a few hours during the middle of the day.
What is that? What are the temperatures like out on the balcony?
I
Like,
get them
what's the
down into the
lowest?
mid 40s.
Wow.
Which is not necessary. And again, I'm only talking about diamonds, inlands, and brettles right now.
Okay.
I don't do that for everything else, but yeah, I like to chill them, and it has been very successful so far.
Boy, so Brettles would be perfect for me to keep outside.
Oh yeah, they don't. It
Man.
doesn't get tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What about what are there any health concerns that you've noticed with womas that they run into? Anything that they're more susceptible to, or anything, or is it the usual, the RI and all that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so. They're pretty robust, and again, that RI I chalk up to the stress of reproduction. I don't think that they're particularly susceptible to it. It just happens, especially when you keep a large number of animals. It's just going to come up. But no, I'd say they're pretty tough, pretty hardy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. And
I guess it's not an ailment per se, but I would be careful with both species of Aspidites in terms of overfeeding and obesity. But that's most pythons,
Yeah. What would you consider overfeeding?
It's going to sound like a stupid answer, but just when they start to get too fat.
Yeah. No, it is true. It's something that I think new keepers need to take into consideration,
Yeah.
is looking at the animal's body composition, because it is so individual. Just
Yeah,
like with
certainly.
people.
And like if I have to break down that answer more, if I have a female that is breeding that year and lays a clutch, she might look like she's getting overfed for a couple weeks, but then as soon as she goes through that reproductive event, when she comes out on the other end, that there's not a drop of visible excess fat on her. She needed that to do what she was doing, versus a male. Maybe in general, the males tend to get less food. They don't need that excess reserve to build up that clutch. And so, yeah, individual specific, I suppose.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for the Woma Care Guide. I think that they seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they're awesome. I know that they're not for everyone, because some people don't like painful kisses, but I think they are for a lot of people, and they're wonderful.
They don't seem like it's never like an aggression thing, from defensive. It seems like it's always food driven, right?
100%. They are by nature extremely docile and placid and carefree. They just think things are food. It's always a food bite. It's never a get away from me, put me down bite.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So do you do with the Argentine, are you doing the same thing with the night drop? Are you turning the heat off at night?
Yeah, I do. I don't have anything without a night drop.
Okay.
Yeah. I just feel like it makes sense.
Yeah.
Sun go down, world get cold.
Yeah. It's And especially in Argentina, it seems
Mhm.
like their climate is more geared towards that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think with most boas and pythons, as long as they're getting the heat that they need to support their immune function, metabolic function during the day, they can handle a lot in terms of
Mhm.
cooling at night.
Right on.
It's a lot
You-
easier, in my opinion, to do damage with heat than it is with cold.
mm. Do you keep any BIs, or have you kept them in the past?
I don't personally. My buddy that I work with animal stuff has some IMG Motley stuff that he's
I
working
have one of
with.
those.
Oh, they're awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
such a
love the
great
black
combo.
boas. Yeah, and he got a litter this year, and I helped raise some of the babies up. So, um, I've worked with them in that sense, but I don't have any that I keep for me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What were you keeping their temps at? I need to get a BI person on this podcast. I have yet to do so, but you always hear that. Well, first of all, if you're on Facebook and on groups and everything, there's a whole lot of madness going on there.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I
I
mean,
stay
it
away
just,
from these places.
I know. Well, and I feel like too, like anybody that's young that's on Facebook is there for reptile groups.
That's
Like
true. Yeah. I would have deleted long ago if I didn't have this snake life.
I know it's it's far too divisive in all other areas.
Yeah.
But with your, I mean, do people still keep boas at, with a 95 hotspot, or is that just too hot?
I mean, I don't think that you need to do that. I
Yeah.
don't people may. My baby rack where I was helping with those animals has like a 86 to 88.
Okay.
Yeah. They did just fine, but I definitely I'm not super well versed with the boa care. I kind of just did my defaults and everything went well.
Cool. No
Yeah.
RIs or anything like that.
No issues. Is that the
And
thinking that they need a hotter hotspot?
well, I mean, I guess it depends. It depends on which YouTube video you watch,
Okay.
and that is, when I got back into the hobby, one of the first places I went was NPR, and I just started scrolling through and listening to everything I possibly could, and got
Me
so
too.
much, yeah, got so much good information on keeping carpets,
Right.
and I was like, wow, keeping them way cooler than I used to, and then listening to the Retic Lounge podcast too, and finding out how cool people are keeping their retics, and
Yeah.
so that helped me with my Timors. And then you look up some boa care guides on YouTube by some pet tubers, and you're going to see like a 90 to 95 hotspot, and then maintaining that
Okay.
throughout the night as well.
Nice.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know,
With stuff like that, I feel like it's, in my opinion, it's unnecessary, first and foremost. But I'm okay with it if you have a good gradient and the snake can get away from it.
mhm,
But unless you have a really big enclosure or you're really skilled at dialing things in, if you have a 95 hotspot, then I have a sneaking suspicion that entire cage is pretty warm.
yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
you got to be careful with that. I think that a really hotspot is fine for almost everything if they can escape it to more reasonable temperatures. But just when we're talking about like a 3 or 4 foot box, it's really, if your hotspot is focused enough for your cold side to still be cold, then it's probably not sufficient to heat like a girthy, robust boa anyway.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it's better to have a more diffuse, less intense hotspot for snakes.
Yeah, yeah, and with when you were raising those BIs, did you have the temperature? Did the heat turn off at night when with your stuff in the racks? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but they were, they were in this main room here. It probably wasn't getting below 72, 73 at night while they were here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't have to stress out then, because I stress out. I mean, I find everything to stress out about, and then a great person to talk to when I'm stressing the hell out is Brian Young. I called him out up last week, and I was like, dude, I don't use thermostats on my cages. I have my deep heat projector set on a dimmer, and the temperature comes up, and then it kind of peaks in the afternoon at around 90, and then the temperature drops, and during the evening it drops down pretty low. I mean, it's in the low 80s, and the cool side's in the probably the mid 70s, and then it's they're able to charge their battery though and heat up during the day, and then it seems like they maintain that body heat throughout the evening.
Yeah, definitely. With the way that they posture, they can retain a lot of that heat long after the environment has cooled down.
Yeah. It's I mean, I'm sure that there's a million different ways to keep snakes.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they're tough. Again, like we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, they made it this far for a reason. A lot of the times it's easier to do damage from over caring than under caring with snakes. So yeah.
I try to have everything. I want to simulate nature too as much as possible. I feel like that's what'll be so cool about keeping outside too, because you can't get more nature than keeping them out in nature.
No, 100%. And I can't wait to do the same one day. It's funny, just kind of around the hills here in the East Bay, there's a ton of eucalyptus. Just, I guess, people, hundreds of years ago or whatever, planted it as a windbreak, and then it just took over. So there's eucalyptus forests all over the place. And whenever I'm driving through or hiking through one of them, I can't stop having these intrusive thoughts that if I let a couple of clutches of Brettles pythons or diamond pythons go, they'd be fine. I'm not going to do it. If somebody does it, it wasn't me. But I mean, they would be fine. They would. It would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I live in Florida, so I have no comment on any of that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it should be done, but it just.
But damn, it would be cool.
It would be cool, and it highlights how adaptable and generalist some of the species are.
Yeah. What now? When you get the ability to keep outdoors, what are you planning on keeping outside?
I would love the diamonds and the Brettles to be outdoors. Definitely lizards. Would be fun to try, like some kind of Aspidites setup. I'd probably want to do something lined with concrete though, because they can dig. I mean, everything. Why not?
Yeah. I've got my cage guy doing wire mesh on the bottom of the cages too.
Nice. Yeah.
So then I'll just backfill it, and
perfect.
Yeah, keep them in there.
I'm excited to see it. That'll be awesome.
Yeah. So I just don't know when an appropriate age to move them outside would be. I don't know if I should wait until they're like 3-4 years old, or if it could be done. I mean, I'm assuming that would probably be the threshold, would probably be about 3 years old.
Yeah. I mean, for a carpet python?
Yeah.
I feel like it. How big's the cage?
It's going to be 8 by 6 by 3.5.
Okay. Yeah, maybe wait till they're big.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the animal would be fine if you moved them outside in like a smaller cage that they couldn't get out of, but
Yeah.
it would be stressful and harder to deal with.
Yeah. And what I really want to do is actually get the cages now and start growing the plants in there and everything. And I want to see what kind of Australian, plants I can get my hands on to grow in there. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
But yeah, we'll see. So before we sign off here, what's your favorite snake of all time? And it doesn't have to be something you have.
Damn.
You can pick 3 if you want.
Okay. Top 3.
Yeah.
One was Blackheads and Brettles.
Oh, that was too easy.
Yeah.
You were just trying to pick the favorite out of those 3.
Yes, exactly. If I could only keep 3, it'd be those 3.
Nice. All right. Well, cool. Where can people find you at?
Centralian Exotics is the name for all of my reptile activities. www.centralianexotics.com. I'm most active on Instagram if you want to get in touch with me. And I do the NPR podcast sometimes. So Morelia Python Radio Network, Carpets and Coffee is a show that we do live sometimes. It used to be every other week. Now it's sometimes. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, keep up the good work on Carpets and Coffee. I love that podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope we get back to a schedule soon.
On it, and it was before we started recording, I brought up your Eric impersonation, which I think that was episode 93, and that one didn't get posted. So I think when 93 came out on Spotify, so then I was like, all right, let me go back and listen to 93. And I think you were heading that one by yourself, I believe, right? Or were you?
Was it me and Owen? Maybe.
Yeah, it was you and Owen.
Yeah. I mean, it's that podcast is chaos. You never know what impression's going to come out. So come for the snakes, stay for the impressions, I guess.
Yeah, and I love how it just rambles too. It goes in all different directions.
Talk about everything except carpet pythons and coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe briefly, like 90 seconds at the beginning. So what are you doing now professionally?
So I work for the same environmental consulting company that I did my field work with, but I'm working more with like project management and helping the other bios in the field and stuff like that. So more reports and desktop stuff, but same species, same company.
Nice. What would you recommend to any young people that want to get into just the whole herp thing, the whole like professionally actually making a living out of it, since you've successfully done that?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess first ask what you want to be doing with said herps, because like I definitely don't make a living keeping and breeding or anything like that, but there are other ways. Environmental consulting is definitely one way to work with animals and be less poor than if you were a zookeeper. But it also like that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be working with herps. It just so happens that a lot of the listed and endangered species in the area that I work are reptiles and amphibians, but that's not the case everywhere. So maybe position yourself somewhere where that's the case if you're trying to do consulting and field biology. But yeah, I mean, I would say just figure out exactly what angle you want to come at things, and then get your feet in the door. You know, if you want to be working with animals more directly, then probably zoological setting is a better bet. If you want to be working more with like a conservation focus or a restoration focus, then private sector environmental consulting might be right for you. But there's a lot of ways to do it. And
so that's more what you're doing, is the conservation and things like that.
Yeah, we do a lot of restoration work. There's a lot of like environmental compliance work. So, you know, if say PG&E or a utility company is doing a project and they have permits that tell them they can't kill Alameda whip snake or San Francisco garter snake or something like that, then they have to hire a biologist to be on site and help them do that, help them manage that and stay in compliance with their permits. So it's that sort of thing. And we do a lot of wildfire mitigation because our state keeps burning down. So when you're clearing out all the brush and all the fuels, you know, there's a lot of critters that live in there. So getting ahead of the crews, doing surveys, relocating animals if needed. It's pretty broad.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's why I was drawn to the work, is that there's a wide variety of tasks, and it keeps it interesting and not pigeonholed.
Yeah. You feel like you're making a difference too?
On some projects, yes, definitely. I mean, there's definitely days where, you know, you're out there for 10 to 12 hours watching dudes dig a hole and you're just like listening to podcasts. But there are other days where it definitely feels that way. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.